glad to see that the rain has stopped. Finally. Let's go around. My name is Nancy. I'm a 15-year cast member here in our park today, and I will be your tour guide. And I'd like to go around and meet each of you. So you want to shout out your first name and where you're visiting from. We'll start over here. New Jersey. New Jersey. Delaware.
Delaware.
The East Coast is well represented. Very good, sir. Florida.
Kirby from Atlanta. Atlanta. Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Georgia.
This is Atlanta, Georgia. Oh, yeah.
Joey from Portland, Oregon.
Oregon.
Elizabeth, Orlando, Florida.
Oregon. Wonderful. Well, we've got both East and West Coast very well represented here today, which is a little unusual. And then we have our local people. Very good. And may I assume that this is not your first visit to the park? Everybody's been here before? Okay.
I've been to Disney World.
Been to Disney World. Okay, because this is a history tour. You all know that the history started here 47 years ago. So we're going to talk about a lot of old things as we go around. We will be gone anywhere from 2.5 to 3 hours. I hope that meets with your approval. If you have to leave because of reservations, please feel free to do so. I don't have a problem with that. Is that okay, everyone? I will try to, if we don't want to be in the sun, I'll try to keep you in the shade, and I'll always try to find a bench or something to lean upon. We have a good sized group, so we'll just do our best. Maybe we can take turns sitting down on the bench or whatever, if that means with your approval. Okay? I'm going to start my tour way back at the very, very beginning, and that means back in Ireland, where the Disney family came from. Do you have a problem with me talking about the Disney family? Okay, all right. The Disney family came from Ireland, came over to Canada, and we are talking about the Kipple Disney family, Walt's grandfather. And his son was Elias Disney. So they came into Canada, that's where Elias went to school, and Elias was one of 16 children. They lived in Canada, they moved down to Ellis, Kansas. This is where Elias Disney grew up. He worked on the railroad when it was going from Kansas out to Denver. So this is where Elias got his machinery and his carpentry skills. Now, the Disney family, Pickles family, they got tired of the cold Kansas winters and decided, because there was a neighbor family, that they would go to Florida because they heard of all the sunshine down in Florida. So if you have a large family of 16 and you want to go see if it's nice or not, and you want to move there, you're not going to take the whole family. So Kipple took Elias and they went to Florida. For whatever reason, Kipple decided not to stay. Elias was old enough to go out on his own, so he did some farming. And you know, it wasn't the sunshine that was keeping him in Florida. It was the Cole family who had moved down there. It was their daughter, Laura Cole. She had gone on to be an elementary school teacher. And they got into the hotel business. He worked for the post office. And then they went into citrus growing. Anybody's read about Florida? Citrus, they have a frost, you lose your crop, and you got to start over again. They had started their family, and if you cannot hear me at any time, please let me know. They had started their family, and there was a Chicago exhibition going on. So Elias thought that he could get work up there, so he moved his family to Chicago. This is where Elias, they completed their family. They had Herbert, Raymond, Roy Oliver Disney, who was 8 years older than Walt Disney. and remained his confidant and his mentor all through his life. Walt Disney was born. Anybody tell me where Walt Disney was born? Everybody hear that? December the 5th, 1901. Very good. How many history books do I have here? Ah, very good. If you think I'm saying something wrong, please let's talk about it, okay? And then 2 years and 1 day later, they have a little sister by the name of Ruth. Now that Walt Disney, the Disney family, Elias has got these children. He doesn't want to raise them in Chicago with all of the crime that happens to be going on at that time. So he has a relative that lives in Marceline, Missouri, and he moves the family to Marceline. Now Walt Disney at this time is 4 to 5 years old. I'm going to show you some quick pictures of what Marceline looked like when Walt went there. The top picture, 1900s, dirt streets, and the bottom picture is what it looked like. Forget the date if you see on my pictures because I'm a dummy and can't operate a camera. This is what the Marceline looked like on Walt's 100th birthday as I went back to Marceline for this celebration. It's a very small town of about 2,500 people, even today. So. Walt's home is this home that sits outside of the town of Marceline. And I just read, and I always wonder, there is a family by the name of Kay Mullins and her parents, Russ Johnson and his wife, that live in Walt's house at this time. And at one time, and the house was white and didn't exactly look quite this glamorous. But Walt was going to do a project years ago called the Marceline Project because he wanted young children to experience the farm life that he had once had and remain with him all through his life. The project, they bought up a lot of property, he and the Russ Johnson. This Marceline project never went, and Russ Johnson bought the property back from the Disney company, and he gave the Disney home to his daughter Kay for a wedding gift. What a wonderful wedding gift that had to be. And she lives there today and is very, very active. In fact, a couple weeks ago we had the Marceline tour guides here at the park. They actually do little tours and everything. So now they live in Marceline. Walt is having the time of his life, 4 to 5 years old. The two older boys, not so much fun. They did their work, and Dad said, well, any money, when he found out what they were going to do with their wages, one was going to buy a watch, the other one was going to do something else. He said, oh no, that's your room and board. So they left home one night. So here is Roy, a little brother, a little sister, and Walt, he's having a fun time. He's riding the pigs, and he gets to do little chores with his mom. You know, Walt always liked to draw. One time he was left home with his little sister, and he decided to draw on the side of the house with some tar. As Walt told Ruth, it'll come off. We all know that tar doesn't come off, and it's still on the side of the house today, but they built onto the house, so you can't really see that. So, fun times, fishing in the woods with a neighbor family. And in order to supplement the family income, Flora made butter. But Elias felt that the butter should not be used at home. So, but Mom always had the soft spot in her heart for the kids, so she would butter the bread on the wrong side and hand it to them. So Elias wouldn't know that there was butter on the bread. So, when Elias now takes ill in the dead of the winter, they had to auction off the farm, and now they're going to move to Kansas City, where Dad is buying a newspaper delivery service. And who do you think is going to deliver the papers? Roy and Walt. Now he is 9 years old. I don't know about you folks, but I'll tell you, when my alarm clock goes off at 4 in the morning, I'm not a real happy camper. Can you imagine? How old are you, young lady? 11. Well, Walt's 9, and his alarm clock is going off at 3:30 in the morning. And he had to get up, he had to deliver the papers, he had to go to school, and he had to deliver the papers again when he went home. He did this for 6 years. Obviously, many times his dad would go in and say, well, he woke Walt up, why isn't he out here for breakfast? Well, poor Walt's sitting on the edge of the bed, he falls sound asleep. He would often fall asleep. The school was not Walt's where he excelled in. He would fall asleep a lot of times, and the teacher would go by his desk, and what's he doing? Drawing cartoons. So he did this for 6 years. Now some fun things. Walt was an actor in his own right. One day for Lincoln's birthday, he learned the Gettysburg Address. He dressed up with a tall hat, black coat, went to school, recited the Gettysburg Address. The teacher was so impressed, she took him to the principal, and that just became a standard thing in that school. Another thing is that Walt had a best friend. His best friend, and his name is Walter Pfeiffer. His dad was just the opposite of Walt Disney. Now, he loved Vaudeville, Charlie Chaplin, all the silent films, so he would take both of the boys. And so that kind of perked Walt's interest in the show and movie industry way back. And one thing you've got to say about Walt Disney is he had a fantastic memory. And personally, I don't think we'll ever see another person that will be like Walt Disney. So he has delivered the papers, and now it's time for Dad to move on again. He's going to go to Chicago and buy a jelly factory.
Oh, I would be able to walk up and do it.
So Roy has gone off because he's graduated from school. He went off to be working a bank, and eventually went to World War I in the service. Now, Walt Disney is old enough to stay in Kansas, help the new people in the delivery service. And in this summer, he got a job. His brother put up a deposit so he could be a news butcher on the railroad. And this was very exciting for a young boy who'd never been out of town, actually, to go on the railroad. But he ate all his profits. But just a great experience. So he goes off to Chicago, works a bit for his dad. He got a job as a guard on the railroad so he could go to a school for cartooning and everything like that. And he actually went to 1 year of high school. Now he thinks that, golly, there must be something that he can do for the war effort. So he can't get into the service, but he applies to the Red Cross to be a Red Cross volunteer. And he is the last name called, and gets to go to Europe with the help of two things. Number one, he was too young, so he had to have an affidavit of birth, which if you look at it, you will see that Flora's and Elias's signature is the same. So we think that Flora forged Elias because Elias wouldn't have allowed this to happen, but Flora wanted to know where her son was. The other thing, Walt changed the year of his birth. You can see it changed on the actual affidavit. So he goes off to Europe. He's gone over there for 10 months. He comes home. Golly, he's much too worldly. He can't go back to high school. So he goes back to Kansas City, and he eventually gets a job as in the Newman Ad Film Company. He does some cartooning. He works for catalogs, eventually meets up with a young fellow by the name of Iwerks. Is anybody familiar with that name? There's a book that came out last year. It's A Hand Behind the Mouse. Although Walt Disney did the voice for Mickey to the year 1946, Iwerks is actually the person that perfected Mickey Mouse. You all know how Mickey Mouse evolved out of losing the character Oswald the Rabbit. They'd gone on the train back to get the Oswald the Rabbit and find out that that character has been taken away from him due to the fact that he is very, very naive in business dealings. So comes up with a mouse he's going to call, what was he going to call that mouse?
I apologize.
Mortimer Mouse. And Lillian says, hey, that's not really a good name for a mouse. So
Anyway,
she named him Mickey. And so while they're back there, Roy has come home from the service and found out that he had tuberculosis, and he was sent out to Arizona and then to California to recuperate. Now all the time he's keeping in contact with his little brother. And at one of these times, I imagine his brother just felt the desperation in his letters. They were very, very meager times. Lots of times Walt didn't have any food to eat. A can of chili, a grilled cheese sandwich. One time a dentist wanted him to do a film. He said, well, I really like to do it, but my only pair of shoes is in the shoe repair shop. He didn't have money to go. He didn't have $1.50 to go get his shoes out of the shoe repair shop. So they were very, very meager times. So his brother says to him, hey kid, why don't you come to California? So Walt thought that was a great idea. He knew this is Hollywood out here. If you're going to go to Hollywood, you're going to be a movie director. Why would you come out to Hollywood? So he comes out with great aspirations. He packed up his worldly belongings in a cardboard suitcase. He sold the only loose camera that he had, some drawing materials and a sweater, bought himself a first-class ticket, came out to California. But, you know, he went to all the studios. He could not get a job. I don't think he could get a job sweeping the floor. So anyway, he gets his brother out of the hospital, and they move in with their uncle, and they start filming in the uncle's garage. Because while they were back in Kansas City, he had formed a little company with Iwerks, which eventually went bankrupt. And are y'all able to hear me? So they had a roll of film called Alice in Wonderland, and he wrote a letter to Margaret Winkler and told him that he had this little studio going. So she says, as long as you have the same little girl, then we will do these films. So they started filming, and eventually got to move into the Hyperion studio, and so that's why we have a Hyperion theater over here. So a lot of these names come back in the Disney company. And this was the year 1923. In those days, you had to have inkers and painters. These were ladies that sat with white gloves and inked and painted all of the cells. Now, eventually the two guys, Walt and Roy, moved out together, and they were living together, and I think maybe Walt complained one too many times about Roy's cooking, and Roy says, I've had it. I'm going to call back to Kansas City and get my girlfriend Edna to come out and we're going to get married. Well, Walt had become very fond of one of the inkers and painters, and what was her name? Lillian Bounce. And so they got married in 1925, 6 months apart. Now the Disney family had two children, Diane and Sharon. Diane married Ron Miller of the Los Angeles Rams. At one time he was working for the company. They have 7 children, and they now own a 105-acre winery up in the Napa Valley called the Silverado Winery. So if you ever are in the Napa Valley, you might want to stop by. And Sharon had 3 children. She has since passed away from breast cancer. Now, when Walt was very, very much a family man, and when he had the weekends, Saturday or Sunday, he would take the girls and they would head off to Griffith Park, and they would ride, the girls would ride the carousel, going round and round, and he sat on the bench eating peanuts, thinking, gee, there should be someplace, a nice, clean, safe environment where the whole family can go and enjoy. And that is the reason that we have Disneyland. So you're working up at the Disney company and you're doing three-dimensional dioramas, you're doing different types of movies and animated features, and Walt comes in and he points to you and he says, meet me tomorrow, we're going to have a meeting because I am going to build a theme park and you're going to help me build it. Gosh, I don't know anything about building. So he called these people Imagineers. Took the word technical engineering and imagination and put it together. These people had never done this type of work before. And he called the company WED for Walter Elias Disney. So they would come, they made the plans for the park, and then they would come and walk around and try to fix those things that were working. So we're going to walk around today, and we're going to talk about some of those things. We're going to first start over at the Disney Story. How many of you have been in the Lincoln, the Disney Story on this trip? We are not going into the actual show. And I apologize if you've seen the little film there, but we do have to watch that little film. I encourage questions. I've been doing all the talking, so if you have any questions, please ask, and we will head on off. If you need to stop and get something along the way, just let me know, and we'll head off to the Disney Story. Thank you for being so patient. Must be having a hot flash. Everybody make it through. Who's going to come with us? Alrighty. As you will see here, we have Walter Elias Disney. And then we have his brother, Roy Oliver Disney. Roy Oliver Disney had one son, Roy Edward Disney. And he is the Disney that you hear about today in the news. If you want to see the show, he had four children, 2 boys and 2 girls. So here is your creative genius, and here is equally the creative genius who had to find how is he going to pay for all of these ideas that his brother keeps coming up with. Here's Walt and Roy in the younger days, a little older, and here's Roy in his Navy, and look at little brother, he looks like I swear he looks like he's 65 years old, doesn't he? Over here we have at Walt Disney. Why they chose this picture when he looked so casual, it was actually the rehearsal for our dedication. Because if you see the actual film, he does have a suit on. And then down here we have his brother Roy Oliver Disney. Now, when Walt was in the hospital, Roy was with him. And he made his brother promise that he would not retire until Project X opened. What was Project X? Walt Disney World. The reason that it was called Project X, it basically kept as a secret, is he wanted to buy all of the property around. And so Roy promised him he would not retire. Walt Disney World opened October 1, 1971, and Roy passed away December 20, 1971. Didn't have a whole lot of time to enjoy that retirement. This is a real Christmas tree, folks. It's a 60-foot tree that we brought down from a tree farm in Mount Shasta. So that would be, you can smell the pine was just put up last week, so it's still nice and fresh.
How come they don't put Mickey Mouse ornaments?
I don't. Yeah, they never have had. Probably because people would take them home with them. Here now we have now gone into the 1900s. This is to represent the 1900s with our town square, so we have many different types of transportation here. And the gas lamps that you'll see more predominant tonight because you really can't see the gas in them right now. But we got those from Baltimore and St. Louis, and we actually paid 3 cents a pound for them. They're going on close to 200 years old, and can you believe they still work? It's amazing. Yeah, gas lamps. Now, in the very beginning, here in the town square, Walt was going to have a gazebo so that the band could play. This is what the gazebo looked like and stood here prior to park opening. That Walt would come into the park, and as he stood at the train station, this gazebo got in the way of his castle. If he went down to the castle, it got in the way of the train station. So he moved it down to what's called Carnation Plaza Gardens to the left of the castle. It's a nice place, but there were no benches and it was out in the sun. So I think that's why the band marches, because so to bring the music to you. And actually the band, the Disney band, was only going to be here for 2 weeks. 47 years later, they're still with us. Moved it over to New Orleans Square area, and then it was given to the city of Anaheim. City of Anaheim couldn't find a place for it. I can't imagine with all the parks we have. So they sold it to an upscale gardening area called Rogers Gardens down in South Coast Newport area. So if you want to go have your picture taken in Walt's original gazebo, that's where it is. Now we had to put something here. So this is where the dedication plaque is, and we put in a flagpole. We got another bargain. The base of the flagpole is from a traffic accident in Los Angeles on Wilshire Boulevard. We paid, it was a light post, and we paid $5. A real bargain. You've noticed how we have the trains going around the park. We have 4, the Ripley, the Gurley, the Holiday, and the Marsh. They're named after the executives of the Santa Fe Railroad. And of course, Walt loved trains, that one experience. And the trains go through Marceline. I don't know how the people sleep down there. The trains go through there. It was a coal mining area, so, but the trains go through there all the time. Now, at one point in 1948, Walt was very, very stressed. The studio nurse by the name of Hazel George said, "You know, Walt, there's a steam train exhibition back in Chicago. Why don't you take Ward Kimball?" Does anyone know the name Ward Kimball? Well, Ward, the reason she picked on Ward is because he has trains this size in his backyard up in St. Gabriel. And still did, I think, probably are still there. He just passed away this year. So they went back, and unlike you and I, when we go to museums and fairs and things, what do they tell us? Don't touch that, don't climb on that, you know, they never let us do anything. But Walt, because of his notoriety, they were like 2 kids in a candy shop. They did everything. They rode the trains, they climbed up in the cabins. And when they got through there, they went to my home state of Michigan. Has anyone been to Michigan? You have? Okay, let's see if you've been to this place. Walt went to visit a gentleman by the name of Henry Ford. In Dearborn, Michigan, and he happens to have a museum and a little park, if you will. And what do you think? Now, this is 1948. I want to show you 2 things that Henry Ford had. He had a steam train that went around his park. He also had a paddle wheel boat called the Swanee. Now, Walt is filing all of this in the back of his mind because he's going to build a park. Also, has anybody been to Europe? Has anybody been to Denmark? Not to Denmark. You got to go because there's a little park in Copenhagen called Tivoli Gardens. And Tivoli spelled backwards says, "I love you." I love it. Anyway, Walt traveled over there with Art Linkletter and his wife Lois. And that's one of the places that he got the idea for twinkly lights in the trees and flowered pathways. Also, way back when Walt lived in Kansas City, there was a place called Electric Park, and obviously a lot of lights on all the buildings. So he brings all of this back in his mind because he is going to build a little park. We are building the 5th train in the roundhouse. I had hoped that it would be done before Ward Kimball's passing, but he has passed on, and hopefully we'll get it finished so his wife Betty can dedicate that. Does anyone have any questions so far? Did I answer all the questions about Town Square?
I would like to know more about Firehouse.
The Firehouse, we're headed that way right now. Let's go. Corn carts. How the little character in there is themed to the land that you're in. So, yeah, you're liable to find over by Matterhorn. Why would I bring you over to a fire station? Well, he kept his, they had a fire truck here. Does anybody know what this is? Yes. Yes, he had an apartment here. If any of you are into collecting books or trivia, you might want to see if Grandma's got a copy of the August 1963 National Geographic, because those were the only pictures at that time that were taken up there. Now, because the park was open like 24 hours in those last months to get it finished, it took so long to come down from Los Angeles. You know, Walt just didn't take a dart and throw it at a map and says, I'm going to build a park in Anaheim, California. He had the Stanford Research Center find a place that was going to not have fog, this morning, and for any of you who had to drive in it, smog and things like that. He wanted it to be virtually an ideal spot, so that's how they settled on Anaheim. And this was all orange and walnut groves in the very beginning. 22 families living on this property. So the cars didn't travel that fast, so he would just stay here. So we had the apartment built and a place for the family to get away. The only entrance to the apartment is what we call backstage. Whether you know it or not, you are on stage today, just like a movie. You are our actors and actresses today. If you were to go beyond that window, across the room is a wooden louvered area. If you were to open it up, you would find a small refrigerator, a sink, Walt's grilled cheese maker, and a Tom and Jerry set. Do you know the cartoon Tom and Jerry? Everybody else knows about it. Yes, okay. And where these wooden pillars were hide-a-beds. Walt had a picture of his mother over his bed, and she had a picture of her mother over her bed. It's done in antiques. Lillian liked antiques and is decorated by one of the interior decorators, Emil Curry. So it's done in that red mauve and that green rose motif. There are two original items up there. One is a Regina music box, which is in the large case with that big gold disc. The other one, or brass, which I'm sure it's brass. On the other side over here is an Edison gramophone, which plays wax discs, and they both still play today. I swear, I worked here for 15 years. I've been a tour guide for 3 to 4 years. Just found out the other day that they can make the Regina music box work. I haven't heard it yet. Somebody wound it wrong, so one of these days maybe I'll get to hear it. Now we obviously have to have a bathroom up there, and Walt had a dresser drawer to keep his extra clothes in. Now the shower is different than the shower that we have in our homes today. It has 3 different nozzles. Now I had 2 theories about this. One was because Walt would get so stressed. We all know how that warm water feels on your neck or in the middle of your back. Or perhaps he was just a very busy man, and once around in the shower, he could be all done and on his way. But I found out it's actually a railroad design, because in those early days, people took a bath in the tub. There was no running water, so you fill up the tub and you climb in. But the railroad was dirty and sooty, and who wants to sit in that? So the railroad came up with this design of a shower, and I understand that they even had a summer home for the parents up at the Silverado Ranch, and it was like that up there. Now, every fire station has to have a fire pole. This is authenticity. Back in the corner is a fire pole, There are no pictures of anyone ever seeing Walt slide down that pole. But I believe in my heart, if anybody could build this wonderful park, one of his toys, he had to try it to see if it worked. Well, one day when security was going by, they looked up in the window and there's faces peeking out. Well, guess what? Some kids climbed up the pole, so we had to close it off. Ordinarily, I see Walt and Lillian have their Christmas tree up early this year in their apartments, but ordinarily you would see a light in the window. The construction workers, when they would go through the town square, would always look up and they'd see a light. They knew that Walt was on property. So we always leave a light on to remind us that Walt is always watching over his park and us. Now, let's go back and talk about just a few minutes about opening day. July the 17th, 1955, 80 degrees, 4:30 in the afternoon. And this was a day for the studio and for the press. You want a really nice report in the press if you've got a park that's going to go over, you want to go over well. So they'd invited about 15,000 people. Unbeknownst to Walt, close to 30,000 people showed up. Walt was being taken from one land to another, so he had no idea what was going on in the park. The press, today when press comes in, we walk with you. If you have questions, we will see that you get the correct answers. In those days, the press just came in, and they formed their own opinions. Walt had to decide where, because there was a plumber strike in those last couple of months, was he going to have restrooms or was he going to have water fountains? He opted for the restrooms. So obviously there were shortages of water fountains. If they were there, they weren't working. So there were long lines for food and for soft drinks. And so when the company sat down the next day to read what the newspaper wrote, they said that he wanted you to buy soft drinks because he didn't have the water fountains and etc. So, and another thing, there had been an asphalt strike, so we're having to haul the asphalt up from San Diego. And 80 degrees, anybody know about asphalt? The ladies, high heels, you noticed in that film for the dedication, there were no ladies in Reeboks and tennis shoes or shorts. They all had their dresses and gloves and little hats. So the shoes got stuck. So when the company read what the press had to say about us, it's known as Black Sunday. So opening day to this day is known as Black Sunday, and then Walt went on to correct as many things as he could, as quickly as he could. Can anyone tell me who were the main three people who took part in the dedication? They were a lot of people, notable people here. Walt's 65th first cousin, Reverend Pruder, gave the invocation. And who else was here to help with the dedications? Ronald Reagan. Another gentleman I have already mentioned. Walt went to Denmark with him. He was a broadcaster, Art Linkletter. The other one people have, every once in a while I'll find somebody who knows the name of Bob Cummings. Now, because Art was a broadcaster, the customary fee to pay was $200. Now, here is this guy who's he's your friend, and Walt was really kind of embarrassed to have to give him the $200. But Art says, no problem. He says, but there's one thing you can do for me. And he says, well, what's that? He said, you can give me all the camera and film rights to your park for the first 10 years, which he did. And so it made him the highest paid broadcaster for one broadcast. And you've got to remember, in 1955, any place, probably in the whole world, there had only ever been 3 television cameras. We had 29 cameras here in the park that day. In order to get everything into our park, we had to use a thing called the forced perspective. Stores on the corners are the largest stores. So as you stand in front of Christmas Tree Point and look down at the castle, the stores actually go up shorter in the second and third stories, and as they go down the street, they get shorter like this. So if you look like this down the main street, it makes the castle look farther away. If you do it from the other angle, it's to bring the train station closer to you. So if you want to take a glance at that as we walk over towards the cinema, the Main Street Cinema. Okay? Cigar Store, India. By the way, as you go around the park, you look at all of our beautiful flowers and everything that are, you couldn't have a more beautiful time here at Disneyland. But Disneyland is one of Southern California's largest botanical gardens. We have over 4,500 trees, over 80 species of plants and trees, and over 45,000 shrubs and perennials. Disneyland is built to the movie concept. So when you go to the movies and you have the credits, Walt's credits on the movies are here in the park are the windows on Main Street. They have the first window kind of covered by a reef, but it's a big by Dave Smith's A to Z at Disneyland to find out what all these people did. We're standing below Arsdale Van France. Underneath there it says Professor Emeritus. He started the Disney University because everyone goes to the university. We are not employees. We don't have a single employee in this park. We are all cast members. We don't wear uniforms. We wear costumes. Now, you heard in the film where Dick Nunes repeated that, Walt said that once you do a film, put it in the can and it's gone. But Walt had a little sentimental thing in his heart for Steamboat Willie, and when they went to his desk, they found that he had the actual script for Steamboat Willie in his desk. So the office is there. I failed to mention, back in the 1970s, the Disney company wanted to preserve the Disney history and start an archives. So they went to the UCLA library, and there was a young man there by the name of Dave Smith sitting in the background listening to Disney's proposal, and he thought he would like to be that archivist. So he actually wrote up his own job description, actually even they had to ask him, what would you charge to be our archivist? He's still the archivist today at the Disney Studios. We have a young man in our department, which I am really proud of for a young person to know where they're headed. And that is exactly where he's headed. He's actually walking in Dave Smith's footsteps because he wants to be up there at the Disney archives, and he's already written a book. So we have some brilliant people here in our park. His name is Jason. Here is in the theater. Has everybody walked in? Really? What we're going to do is walk in, walk around. We'll just walk in, walk around. It's kind of hard to talk in there because it's almost noisier than it is out here. But when it opened, they were showing a film called Gertie the Dinosaur. And I don't think it was a Disney animated feature. But we're showing Galloping Ganchos and Playing Crazy in here. So we'll just walk in, walk around, and walk on out again, okay? Please be careful because it is dark inside and out. Disney. Ken Anderson actually did the three-dimensional dioramas in the castle. Unfortunately, that is closed and you cannot. It's a Sleeping Beauty story, and that area is closed now temporarily till way next year. He also was an animator at the studio. It says Ken Anderson Bait Company. So, oh my gosh, you look at that. What did he do? Well, Walt Disney, Ken Anderson himself was a fly fisherman. And Walt Disney thought that fly fishing was just the dullest hobby that anybody could have. So he put that little tongue-in-cheek window up, and for anybody, does everybody know what fly fishing is? You don't use worms and all that good stuff, okay? The best, one of my favorite windows, and there's one to Emil Curry, who he did the Mary Poppins movie, and he decorated the apartment with Lillian's help. Down below it says, Orange Grove Property Management will care for your property as if it were our own. Ron Dominguez. Ron Dominguez, their family was one of the families. Their home was over in the New Orleans Square area. There were 22 families on the property. Their property was handed down to them from a Spanish land grant. So this property goes way, way back. He was a young man going to college. Got a job. He was a ticket taker. He was going to go back to school at the end of the summer, and they said, "Hey, Ron, why don't you hang around? There's a lot of job opportunities here." He went on. He worked on the Jungle Cruise. He worked the keel boats with Mike Fink, and went through attractions and all the executive offices, and actually retired as executive vice president of Disneyland. You can go wonderful things for young people here. Another name you might be familiar with is, anybody know the name of Tony Baxter? Tony scooped ice cream over here in Main Street. He went on to do Splash Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain, worked on the Tomorrowland, and has worked on our Disney's California Adventure, and now he is like executive vice president of the Imagineering, Creative Imagineering. This little area here going back, which goes back to the lockers, was going to be called Central Street, and they were going to have a Chinese town and a restaurant with Confucius, but it never really happened. It was going to be kind of the early beginnings of animation, but it never happened. The corner store here, the Disney Clothiers, was Hallmark, and actually the whole family got their start in Kansas City like Walt got his start. But the sounds, the smells. Now, have you ever noticed across the street, there's some lovely little awnings. We got over the Blue Ribbon Bakery and the yogurt shop and the ice cream parlor and the candy palace. And we thought those awnings was there to keep the sun off. Wasn't that thoughtful of them? Have you ever noticed that below, looks like there might be vents there? Now, Disney would never have fans that blow out the smells of those stores, and the awnings there to hold that down to make you hungry and want to go. We wouldn't do that. No, we wouldn't. History of underwear. Actual Hollywood. Right there. Lasted about a year. I understand that there was actually a mirror in there. I didn't hold up and the whole darn policeman bust. It's called the Red Wagon Inn. Now, you had kings, queens, emperors, and everybody coming to visit the park. And Walt, in those early stages, he was the one that would be the host. But there got to be so many people coming that he had to start our tour guide program. Now, in those early days, he would bring, if he was hosting a group of dignitaries or movie stars, whatever, there was a room in the back here where he could kind of be separated from the guests. But on many occasions, overzealous guests would interrupt the meal in wanting autographs, as we all like those autographs. So we wanted to have a private place to entertain, and I'm going to show you that later. So this was the Red Wagon Inn. That's why the little corn dog cart is called the tour guide. He noticed that one of the ladies at the main gate was selling lots of tickets, and she was helping people plan their day. Her name was Cicely Rigdon. Now, before getting a job as a ticket seller, she tried 5 times to get a job here. She was the worst way. On her 5th try, she got hired. She was so excited, she went home and drove her car right through the end of the garage. So she actually started our tour guide program and went on to then be the ambassador. I call her the mother of the ambassador, which we're choosing our new ambassador to our park tomorrow, and we're all hoping it's one of the people from our department we're choosing. And this is a person that represents the park. And they do that in all the parks. A wonderful opportunity for a young person. You ever try out?
I have not tried out.
You got to do that. Over at the information board, for those of you who've been visiting the park, you know that's a great place to find your wait times. And we're doing something. If you have any family or friends, we don't have any little ones on our tour today, but that's where we're measuring the children with ultrasound. Put a paddle on their head, give them a wristband, tells what attractions they can go on. So that's kind of a new inventive thing that we're doing. Over to the hub area. Noticed that people got disoriented. They just didn't know where to go or where to meet. So this is our central plaza, the hub, whatever you would like to call it. But going back to the movie theme, this is the trailer of the movie. I have to admit, that when I lived in Michigan, I thought a trailer was something you pulled behind the car. I didn't know it was a Hollywood term for the preview of the movie, the preview of Walt's park. So you could stand here and see the 5 original lands of Disneyland. Originally, if you went into Adventureland, you had to go in, you had to come back out. You went into Frontierland, you went in, you come back out again. So things have been up until Mickey's 65th birthday when this sculpture was put in. You may have seen a Ferris wheel here. One year we had a contest where you might have won a GM car, and the GM car came right up out of the center there. It was wonderful, but you had to pay the taxes. So they got Wayne Gibson, who was in the film there, and much, much younger in those days. He sculptured this, and John Hinch did the drawings, but when they finished, they said, Wayne, Walt's sitting here. And he says, look what we've created here together. Who can tell me what his birth date is?
November 18th, 1923. 25?
No, 1923, Walt just came to California, so 19, and that's also Minnie's birthday, but we don't talk about her birthday. You know, Mickey is going to be 75 years old next year. 75 years old. You know what? He doesn't have a gray hair on his head. I had the privilege of sharing Walt's 100th birthday, which took place right here with Richard Sherman at the piano, and I had John Hinch, who is the official portrait artist for Mickey. He is, at that time this year, he will be 94 years old. You folks thinking of retiring. This man drives back and forth to work every day. I can't imagine. I hope he lives close to the office. But he's working on Mickey's 75th portrait. And so I think it's really wonderful. And we are going to head over to Adventureland. You're awfully quiet. Nobody has any burning questions? Let's... You don't... It probably should be the same, but where is the partner statue in Florida? Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I dance for Slopes to Land, which is how we went down in Palm Springs. And one thing that you have to realize, the Disney family, number one, they were not a Hollywood family. And before over here in the Tiki Room is the first example of audio animatronics with the Tiki Room. Because Walt had gone to New Orleans, they loved New Orleans, and he had picked up a little word page the little bird, which you can see down in Florida. They have another one. He picked up 2 of them. And he was so enthralled with this little bird in there, he gave it to Lethal Rogers and had him take it apart to see how these little birds work. Actually, he wanted to have a restaurant. He wanted to kind of have live birds, but this never became part as a restaurant. So, the one land that everybody was really excited about in this new park was Adventureland, because you know what? They had hippopotami, I guess you could say, in a jungle. They were audio animatronics. But early audio animatronics was done with a, I'm going to have you, this is going to be a test at the end of the tour. It was a cam and lever, electronic, hydraulic, pneumatic approach to audio animatronics. Today, the most sophisticated animatronic figure, non-human, is Hopper, that is in Bug's Life. Of course, Mr. Lincoln is umpteen generation of audio animatronics. 1 minute of audio animatronics takes 8 to 10 hours to program. And I will share an experience. I was down in Florida where they have the Hall of Presidents. I was down there for New Year's. And after we came out of the performance, now I was not dressed like this. I had a yellow raincoat on because it's rain. I looked like anybody else, but I must have said something to a family member. When this lady, I'm going to say between 45 and 55, approached me, the ultimate thing that was with her was the fact that she thought that that was President Bush that had stopped by to talk to us today. When you can get people to honestly believe that that is a real person up there, that is an absolute tribute to Disney as far as I'm concerned. I think it's wonderful. I had a hard time convincing her that that wasn't President Bush up there. We're going to head on down this way. New Orleans Square was not here when the park opened, and it was dedicated, and because Walt, they needed a place to entertain. Lillian liked antiques. This was, and they liked New Orleans, so this was opened up in 1966 in the summer and dedicated with the mayor of New Orleans and Walt Disney. So this shop here was called One of a Kind, which is now the Les Baton Rouge, where you get all your stuff from the Haunted Mansion. And then we have the balcony. You can see this is where the Disney apartment was going to be built, where he could entertain his dignitaries, and it was the whole apartment which we're going to walk in and out of. But the balcony is what we use for Fantasmic viewing when Fantasmic is here. You can see Walt and Roy's initials in the ironworks right up there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, has everybody been to the gallery? Okay, let's close. What we're going to do is just take a quick walk through, talk about what the rooms were going to be, and it's now the exhibit on the Haunted Mansion. So then you can go back and read about Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. Everybody been in the Haunted Mansion this time, isn't it? And the imagination of those Imagineers, I mean, it just blows me away because I don't understand all that stuff. So we're going to actually, I'm going to take you backstage.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Why not?
I got the kids to go autograph.
And usually they go up the stairs to the gallery, but a lot of them don't realize we have a makeshift register. Yeah.
Okay, if Walt and Lillian had invited us up to their apartment today, this is the front door, so you technically will be going backstage. So this had, because Walt Disney died on December the 15th, 1966, and this apartment was never opened as an apartment, and Roy never proceeded with it. We did use it for offices for Tokyo and Paris when we were on Euro Disney. So you would have come back here if they'd invited you over for lunch. Announce your name. Here was a wooden electronic gate across here, and you would have then gone up the steps. Please be careful if the last person would put the cheese sauce, I appreciate it.
That's why they're different hands.
Big black spider on it. Really cute in a box with Jack Skellington on it as chocolate cake. Really fun desserts. Okay, this is the front door. A lot of the woodwork, the chandeliers and that are all the original. We're going to go to the room on your left.
Tired? Huh?
Oh, Mommy, look.
That was it. And then for Christmas, we're going to do the moat.
Would have been the area where you would have dined, and there would have been lovely tables set up, maybe a banquet table, and some beautiful flowers. And you can see the entrance, the border there, where you would have gone into the kitchen area. Hi, Vanna. How are you?
Okay, so we gotta get.
There's another one that's the door to the Haunted Mansion. I don't see it up there. That one talks too. That thing. And I didn't go on my tour actually going by it. I got the perfect place at home. They said that. This area here, what I think of it is if family room at your own home. This is where they would have informally, the family would have met. And behind the counter is still a refrigerator and sink and garbage disposal because they used this for the fantastic gallery view. So it's still functional today. This is the area here where they would have formally met their dignitaries, and there was no windows here. In 1987, we put the bridge and did the doors. If you'd like to see two original drawings by Dorothea Redmond of what this room was going to actually look like, if you look here by the two guest rooms, you can see one at the patio and one at this area, and they're on this left side. They were guest rooms for the grandchildren. If there is years between your visits be sure to come up here to the gallery because these exhibits change all the time, and as soon as the end of January come, this will all leave. Now this was going to be the master bedroom, and you can tell because of all the outlets along the wall. Now, I thought it would be really great to have been a Disney grandchild and had this all come to be if Walt staying and come and stay with Grandma and Grandpa and be able to get up in the morning and go out on the balcony. You know that the Swiss Family Robinson family used to live next door, and they finally got their act together. They built a boat and they sailed back to New York. And Tarzan and Jane were flying through the jungle and they saw the vacancy sign. So with the help of Martha Stewart, they have set up housing. And let's see how much it belongs to Tiki size. No, we can. This patio area here was set up with air conditioning and forced heat because that's what Walt thought of everything when he wanted to entertain his guests. I would like to give you some ideas to think about. First off, we are at 1313 South Harbor Boulevard. We're at 21 Rural Royal Street. A 2 and a 1 is a 3. Post Office Box 3232. Excuse me. Now, did you know with that 1313 that M is the 13th letter of the alphabet? Is that scary or what? So we are going to go out and go down the front steps and head down this way. And because it's so crowded, there's a couple things I'd like you to look for. How many people have been to New Orleans? Okay. First off, as we walk in, I should have pointed to you as we walked in, there's an alligator there because that's how Santa got in to New Orleans, is on an alligator. And then you will notice on the poles these spikes that come out about 3/4 of the way up. And that was to keep the young men from climbing up on them, to see the girls on the balconies. And the third item to look for are plaques on the wall. And there happens to be one when we go down and just go in at Cafe Orleans, and there's a little plaque up on the wall. Now those plaques on the wall were to signify that the proprietor of the shop has paid their fire insurance. So you might want to take a look at those and look at out. upscale dining. This is your Blue Bayou. By the way, any of our sit-down restaurants, you are now able to make reservations 30 days in advance of your visit. We have Club 33. This is your private club that sits right over here. And it is a membership-only club, very exclusive. Has anyone been there? Been there? It's exclusive dining for these people who have memberships. Again, 33, the reason for the 33, I guess Walt just liked threes, but because liquor is served there, and Walt didn't want to have alcohol connected with Disneyland, it's connected with 33 Royal Street, Club 33. So if you had the ability to go inside the door, you would see a glass pulley elevator that Walt had once seen in a hotel in France. But so he asked them there when he and Lily were there, could he buy their elevator? But they said no, so he came home and sent the Imagineers over to build the glass pulley elevator. There is a stairway that goes upstairs, and at the room, which would be on your right, this was once called the trophy room. In this room, they had animal heads on the wall. There was a buffet with a two-way mirror. There was microphones in the chandeliers. And there was to be an owl, a raccoon, and a vulture that would talk. Now, because animal heads on the wall are not the thing you do today, and because this never really came about, they're all pictures of Walt. But the idea behind it was, so you're sitting there and you're dining and you say, oh, gee, I'd like to have a clean napkin, or I'd like another glass of wine. In walks the waiter. He didn't come and ask you what you wanted. Also, somebody could go in the audio room and interact with the conversation at the table. Now, the only thing, now it's all pictures of Walt, like Walt's room, like if you were to go over to Paris, they have a restaurant, which is called Walt's Place. So this is a vulture. The vulture is the only thing that's left. He sits over the door upstairs in this room here. The actual part of the restaurant is over Cafe Orleans, so there's over here and out here. Now up there also is the glass elevator from the movie Mary Poppins. And I don't have a picture of that, probably I'll have to take a picture of that flight picture or something. And just the marble table from the movie Mary Poppins. So we're going to go around this square here into this was Frontierland Station because it was the New Orleans Square. The building on the back was on this side, and then they moved it to the other side. It came from the movie So Dear to My Heart, and is an actual set from that movie rebuilt here. If you're on the train and you hear the teletype on there, that's parts of Walt's opening speech. There's two stories I've heard about this. One says that Walt's walking through the park with his wife Lillian, and she said, "Did you know that that's your opening speech?" He said, "That was pretty good." The second story is that Walt was walking through with the Imagineers, and she said, "Did you know that Lillian can read Morse code?" I don't know. Was it changed? We'll probably never know. The Haunted Mansion. Lillian was raised on an Indian reservation. Her father was a federal marshal, so that's the story behind that. The Haunted Mansion sat vacant for 6 years. There was so many things going on in the 60s. The 1964 World's Fair. Anybody go to that? Oh, yeah. Did you? Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later. They didn't know was it going to be a walkthrough. And Walt died. They're doing Pirates, because Pirates was the last attraction Walt actually worked on. And it opened in 1967. Now, the Haunted Mansion, as you know, has been changed. The original Haunted Mansion, the only original authentic item in there is Madame Leona's seance table. Madame Leona is the person whose head is in the ball. She was an artist up in the studio, and they just asked her, "Would you do this as a trial?" She did so well, they kept it. Interesting, her last name is Toombs, T-O-O-M-B-S, and that's her daughter's head that is in the ball today. And at the ballroom scene, we goofed, and it's hard to see it a little bit now because of the way it's with the gingerbread houses. That's a real house. I haven't got all the details on it this year, but it's all gingerbread, weighs like 800 pounds. It's all like that. The women are leading in the dance scene. The organ came from 20,000 leaves under the scene. We actually got that light concept from, we call them the dune buggies, from the 1964 World's Fair. That vacant, and 2 weeks after that opened, we had the highest attendance ever. At that time, it had been vacant for so long that everybody wanted to come.
Disneyland Limited.
You know, I must get here like very early. I have to get up like Walt did when he was a young child, because I have to feed 999 ghosts and ghouls and goblins their breakfast. And what do you think I would feed them?
Tomorrowland.
Oh, I bring in ghost toasties with evaporated milk. He was going to get married, and he told his new bride that he was a captain, but he was actually a bloodthirsty pirate, and so she killed herself, and her heart's still beating for him up in the attic, and he kills himself. He hangs himself in the lobby area. The Rivers of America are going to be closing January the 20th. It will not open until mid-April or the end of April. We're actually getting, I don't know what all's going on, but I think they're going to drain the river, probably do something with Tom Sawyer's Island. I don't know what. OSHA has, if any of you have been reading about all the things with OSHA, they've, good and bad, I've always felt we were one of the safest theme parks around, but we've had to do an awful lot of different things because of OSHA. So perhaps that's what it is. We're also getting ready for our 50th anniversary. So the river hasn't been drained since 1992. When we first put the water in, the water disappeared. Had a sandy bottom. So we had to go in and we put in a clay bottom. And then when we put in Fantasmic, we put in a permanent bottom. So, and it's to represent the river traffic from over 150 years ago. I believe you will see, you know, years ago, this area down past the Haunted Mansion was the Indian Village. Anybody remember the Indian Village? And then it went to be bear country, and the bears Ice just left us, oh darn. And then we got Critter Country, and we're getting the pool ride from Florida. Opening next spring. Said oh poop.
They give people plan for that.
The Indian war canoes, because we did have actual, probably 15 to 16 different Indian tribes that took part in that. So Walt wanted to have Indian war canoes, so he went off to the Navajo Desert to get the Indians to paddle the canoes. No water in the desert. But they did have Indians, they probably had to train them. So we're going to head on over to, and Fantasyland will not be back till next summer. We're going to, right now it's summer entertainment. Probably when we go to the 50th anniversary, we'll probably be every day again. So we're going to head this way. It was built at the studio, and the top part was built at the studio, the bottom part was built at the top shipyards in San Pedro. The reason Walt wanted to have that, if you think about it, it's the only mass transit that was ever devised here in the United States. It was dedicated with Irene Dunn. She broke a bottle with water from a representative of the 7 great rivers of America. The Columbia, which is out and is coming in right now, when Walt told that he wanted to have this Columbia, the Columbia was the first ship to sail around the world with the American flag. It took him 3 years, and we can sail around in 15 to 18 minutes. And he says, well, now, Walt, if you're going to build a ship like this, you're going to have to put, you want it authentic, you're going to have to put a silver dollar under each of the masts. So there is a silver dollar under each of the masts. And it is an exact replica, except for the mast, because if there were the original mast, it would tower over the Matterhorn. It would be so large. Now, we have a 5-ton piece of petrified rock over here from Colorado. Now, Walt and Lillian celebrated their 30th anniversary before the park opened. A few days, they had a party on the Mark Twain and in the Golden Horseshoe. And on their 31st wedding anniversary, and I'm going to just deviate from the story just a tad. Walt said to Lillian, what would you like for your anniversary this year? And she said, a rock. And Walt, being the romantic person that he was, he got her a 5-ton piece of petrified rock. Well, it wouldn't fit on the fireplace mantle, so she did give it back to the park on the 32nd wedding anniversary. You all know that the Golden Horseshoe, that show that had been in there, went into the world's Guinness, yes, you say it, okay, thank you. In those original days, you know, Daniel Boone, Fess Parker was Daniel Boone, and it made, Walt made him a star, and that pretty cello made her a star. We sold over, in that era, there was 300 million coonskin caps sold, so if you weren't wearing one of those, you were wearing the little Mickey Mouse ears. Inside the Golden Horseshoe, that is an exact replica of the Calamity Jane Saloon in the movie Calamity Jane, because Warner Goff did it. That's what in the opening. And when Fess Parker and Buddy Epstein came in for that opening day, their horses, the gardener and the director got their signals and somebody turned the sprinklers on them. So the gardener did. Over in this area, for those of you who have been here for years ago, we had a stagecoach ride. Then we went and we had the mule ride. Anybody remember the mules? And then we put in the mine train ride. There were several versions of that. And now we have Big Thunder Mountain, which is patterned after the Bryce Canyon. And a lot of the railroad equipment is from a Disney movie called Hot Lead and Cold Feet. Over in this area, we used to walk out of the mine train ride, and you used to walk into Mineral Hall, which was around the corner, and that was the first use of the dark, that light that shines, what do you call those? Black lights, yes, that used to come out. Walt was very innovative. He was he was at the front of technology and actually is the one kind of responsible for getting the United States going on the space program. Believe that one or not. Over here we had a restaurant called Frito-Lay Restaurant. In there, the Frito Bandito was in a machine. You could put a nickel in and he would hand you a nickel bag of Fritos. When was the last time you ever saw a nickel bag of Fritos? And then we go on from there to Casa Mexicana, and now recently a Rancho de Palo, which is themed for the Zorro, which has Big Thunder food from Big Thunder Mountain and the Mexican food. Over here, the shooting expedition was actually aboard his miniature ponies. We had a blacksmith there who had to shoe the horses, the mules, and they took that out. We put in a shooting arcade, but every night we had to come in, and because it was pellet guns, and we had to paint all of the targets. And now with our new laser technology, we don't have to go in and paint the targets, although we use over 20,000 gallons of custom paint a year. Some of the things you might not think about is that every morning before you come in or while you're coming in, Mr. Schmee comes in and he washes all the windows in the park. All the lower windows are all washed and all the brass is all polished. We're basically kind of on the downhill side of our tour. I'd like to give you an opportunity at this time, if anyone would like to go to the summer house, you may go to the summer house. Now some are for boys and some are for girls, and they're right over that way. Anybody? Okay, we're going to head this way. Our candlelight is Steve Collins in it. Okay, who's that? Somebody, the Father in Seventh Heaven, is doing our Sunday night candlelight.
The only reason I asked is it's one of my wish lists at home for VIP tours.
VIP?
Yeah. I think that would look, but I know I'm not going to go and ask.
My number one is Danielle Steele.
Oh! She come? No.
No, I've never had it. This is where we do a lot of Japanese weddings today during this Japanese garden here. And now we're at the castle, which was inspired by When You Wish Upon a Star. It's done to the force perspective. So, a smaller brick at the top, a larger brick at the bottom. Disney Family Crest, they've got it covered, but it's right over the walkway. It's underneath all the green stuff there. It's patterned after Neuschwanstein, which is one of Mad Ludwig's castles. And Mad Ludwig built his castles very large and foreboding because he wanted to scare off all the peasants. But Walt didn't want to do that to you, so that's why it's built to the forced perspective. On the top, you see that the gold, and there's a saying that says that everything that glitters isn't gold, but here at Disneyland, yes it is. It's transparent gold leaf. The walkway over the drawbridge was never meant to open. 2 weeks after the park opened, or before the park opened, excuse me, Walt thought that that would be a nice touch, and what the boss wants, the boss is going to get. And so they were able to get the drawbridge to work with a winching system. Now, the stories that I have heard, you know, you've all seen that film where the kids ran across. That drawbridge has only been up and down twice for people to walk across. And 1983, because Fantasyland never looked like what Walt really wanted, it looked more like a traveling circus, we redid it to make it look like a 400-year-old medieval town. Then I read it was the children of the original children that ran across the drawbridge. So it's kind of nice, some of the things that we go back and keep bringing back to the park. Now, as I mentioned, back there in Walt's office where they had that map, Roy was going back on Monday to get the funding for the park. Well, you just don't go back to these people with all these words. You kind of need a map. So Walt on Saturday called up Herb Ryman and said, come over to the studio. And he goes and he wonders, what in the world does this man want? So he tells him about this little theme park he's going to build. And he says, Roy's going back on Monday and I need a map. He says, I'm not interested in making any map. And he said, and by the way, where are all the drawings? Well, there were a couple, and Walt said they were in his head. Well, he couldn't convince Herb Ryman that he should do this. And he turned his back, perhaps he was looking out the window of his office, or just turned back his back to the, and looked at the wall and turned around, and when he did, there were tears coming down. Now, how could you not draw this map for this man who felt so passionately about his part? Her Brahmin's wife said it was the lost weekend because because Walt said, I will work with you and I will stay with you. And they spent 43 hours drawing the map. And so the saying that says a picture's worth 1,000 words is very true today. Now, Herb Ryman also had in his office this castle, the model. But one day when he was cleaning up, he put the top on wrong. This is the way it was supposed to look. And wouldn't you know that Walt just happened to walk through and he said, ooh, I like it that way. Let's keep it that way. So personally, I think Walt just had to be the genius. He knew, and this is much more the formal welcoming, and this so much more fits into our theming of our new Fantasyland. So we're just going to take a quick look at Fantasyland before we head on out. Had 18 attractions, so there was no Pinocchio, no Dumbo, and no Alice. But we opened up the attractions some even weeks and months later. Now Dumbo, and even in the early pictures, I just recently saw like one of the poster boards for Dumbo, all the elephants were pink, which they would have been in the movie when they had that little episode. And they actually were contemplating making our elephants pink, but then Walt didn't want to send the wrong idea to young children. So the elephants, we had 10 elephants, and various colors, and they went round and round, and they got very tired. And so Euro Disney was building a new park, and they had a Dumbo with 16 elephants, so we went over and took it, brought it over here. They were able to get another one done. So if you will look at the colors on Dumbo, you will notice that the coloring is very much different than what is in our Fantasyland today. Now, the carousel. The carousel was made back in the 1800s. And he was a carousel that counterclockwise had 72 horses on it. And we are having to make it ADA compliant. That means putting a bench and a wheelchair tie down and a ramp. So it will no longer be a carousel, and whether it goes counterclockwise, I don't know or not. It will no longer have 72 horses. It will no longer be wooden. And as the metal structure is going up, it will not open until about, I think it's there, now it's the end of January. It's taken quite a while to. When they first started, I guess they thought, well, we'll just take off the horses and do this. And then the turntable disappeared, and then the whole thing disappeared, and they've really had to do it all over again. Around the corner, and some of you may remember that we had a pirate ship, and you could get wonderful clam chowder and tuna sandwiches, yes. And then beyond there is your storybook canal boats. It's going to be called Canal Boats of the World. And when we opened it, it was male cast members. The motors were very noisy, and they would break down. So the guys would have to literally pull the boats through there. Well, another thing, there was nothing in there. It was a land of miniatures, but there was nothing there. So they would have to tell you, now, the 3 little pigs are going to live over here, Cinderella's castle is going to be over here. Well, when we dedicated it, they had kids, 4 of the Mouseketeers, and we had an attraction over in Tomorrowland you probably would not expect to find in Tomorrowland, but I'll talk about why we had it later. And it was the Dairy Princess, the American Dairy Association. We didn't have a live cow over there, but they had the processing of milk. And so they brought over the Dairy Princess, and she poured milk, dedicated the boats by pouring milk over the hulls of the boats. Now, we had a problem when we opened. We noticed that the majority of the people were going to 2 attractions. The Jungle Cruise, to see those animatronic hippos that are done with ham and lever and electronic, Anyway, so they sat down and they came up, devised a way to get you to visit all the other attractions. What did we do? I think you got some home in the drawer if you visited us a long time ago. Ticket books, yes, A, B, C, D, and E. So that's what, and then they went away in 1982. So that's how we got you to go around. What we're going to do is we're going to go back this way. This side here is more the European side, and the other side with Mr. Toad and Peter Pan is more the English side of our little Fantasyland. Have you been here and been in Fantasyland and just feel like, golly, there's somebody looking over my shoulder all the time? Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever seen the evil queen keeping an eye on you? But she sure watches out for me. Let me show you. Restaurant. You all wanted to see the center of Disneyland before Toontown. That's it.
What? What?
The center of Disneyland before Toontown.
Put my foot on it. That would be the job I would do.
You all know that you should bow. Right now, go ahead, everyone. Whatever. Here, he said, and there were all these plates sitting around. And he said, open them up. And he said there were all these wonderful elevators carving of the seven dwarfs. And John said, well, he was looking around, he wanted to see the big one for Snow White. Well, there just wasn't one. And what had happened when they opened it up, they found, and they were addressed, believe this, Walt Disney, California, from Italy. And the gentleman, the Italian sculptor, had sculptured them from a box of soap. Well, in order to get them in there, Snow White was smaller. So John had, if you walk around over this way, he had the perspective, and we added the deer and the other animals there. And John Hinch also put the voice in the well from John. I'd like to give you a magic penny. You may make some magic wish in the wishing well before we move on.
One for Anthony, one for Mommy, Anthony.
Perfect timing.
This is Matterhorn Way, which goes on out to Town and Small World. We'll just talk a minute about Small World. There is 300,000 lights out in that area you'll see tonight. And after the fireworks, and even the holiday magic, if you believe hard enough and long enough, it just may snow, so bring your overcoat, okay?
Then they cancel it.
And then they cancel it. Well, it's not going to rain tonight. Let's hope. Isn't that a shame? The first weekend and the weather does this. Small World was just recently repainted for the 50th anniversary back to its original colors, because we had changed different colors to put them to the colors of France that we have in Euro Disney, because they showed up more on a dull day, but that's recently being redone. All the kids in there have all some little holiday fare, and there's over 300 of them in there, and they now are singing for the gentlemen. They're singing not only Small World, but Deck the Halls and Jingle Bells, so you won't have to have that ringing in your head all along. The men just don't like that attraction. When we dedicated it, authenticity, all the kids were around. They all had a liter of water. That water was brought in from all around the world. We have a bill in the Disney archives for $21.86 that we paid to air freight a liter of water in from Venezuela. The dolls, there are 24, one for every hour of the day. I read an interesting thing. Now, the lady went to the World's Fair. Do you remember Small World? You don't remember. Okay. You do remember Small World. You remember that. I just read the other day where prior to it opening there, they went in one morning to ride the attraction around, make sure everything was going. Somebody put soap suds in it. So the soap suds was 4 feet high, they said, in the truck. Then, and it was just in a building. This is more, it didn't look like this. It was in a building over there. Then the next day, they get that all cleaned up. They go in the next day and somebody put koi fish in there. What? Koi fish. Somebody being funny. The Matterhorn Mountains. 140, castle's 77 feet high, by the way. This is 147 feet. And it's built to the 100th scale of the Swiss Matterhorn. And right now, if you were to go inside, it looks like a piece of Swiss cheese. Due to OSHA, we are having to make it so, let's say you were 7 foot tall and you had an arm span of whatever, you would not be able to reach out and touch any of the mountain. Was one of our first e-tickets. There were 3 attractions put in 1959, the Matterhorn, the subs, and the monorail. It actually was the first dual tubular style roller coaster in the United States, and it's 2 attractions, so the left side is faster, the right side is 19 seconds longer. Let's see what I put out. Yeah, it's a bobsled ride. Kind of a bobsled ride. And
with stuff on top?
And that's going to be now pushed out till January next year.
Is it light or dark?
Well, it's dark. There's caves and there's the abominable snowman is in there, Harry. It goes quite fast. I particularly kind of splashes down in the water. It was actually going to be called Holiday Hill, and Walt wanted you to be able to slide down in the snow, but the snow would have melted, and then we did a movie called Third Man on the Mountain that actually inspired it, and has a memorial up there for Frank Wells, one of our executives who climbed mountains all over the world and was unfortunately killed very early in his life in a helicopter crash. So there is a memorial up there. Remember, we also have the Skyway that used to go through there. Probably one of the first attractions that disappeared overnight.
What's on the very top up there? The thing sticking
That
up?
is where Tinkerbell lives. And that's where she flies from. And I have the greatest admiration for Tinkerbell because I've been up there. I've been to some very interesting places in the last 15 years. Places I wasn't supposed to be, but somebody else is going. I'm going to be right there. Then the monorail, which sits over the far side, was dedicated with Richard Nixon and his family. And what happened was they were standing over there waiting for this, and Nixon's daughters, Julie and Trish, were going to cut the ribbon. They had been given a big pair of wooden scissors, and this was their big day to shine. It was a recorded event. And so they're standing around waiting for these. If you've ever been to one of these events, they never happen when they're supposed to. So Walt just turns to Richard and says, "You want to go for a ride?" He says, "Yes," so off they went. Secret Service standing over here talking, turn around, point out the vice president. So Walt Disney technically kidnapped the vice president of the United States, but he brought him back. So now it's time for the event to take place. The girls are going to cut the ribbon. Guess what? Wooden scissors don't cut. So here they are, almost helpless, and Uncle Walt, heavy help, he just reached over and broke the ribbon for the girls. Now, one of the attractions that we had here where this big tree is was called Monsanto's House of the Future. This was a plastic house. Anybody remember that plastic house? There are some pictures of it on Main Street, and I'm going to point out one kind of picture of it. In there was a flat black plastic thing. Now the man of the house could take this black plastic thing, put it in the palm of his hand, walk across the room, sit down in his easy chair, prop his feet up, and press a button, and you know what? The TV would actually change clear across the room.
Remote control.
Yes. And for the ladies in the kitchen, the moms had this little box, and she could put a frozen dinner in there, press a button, and a gourmet meal was on the table in no time. Well, after 10 years, few people had the remotes. Probably fewer people had the microwaves, but they figured, yeah, this time to take it down. They brought in, tonight was the night, they brought in one of those great big huge steel wrecking balls, smashed it against the house, nothing happened. In all the things I've read, I've never read anything technical enough to say, well, how many times did they do it before somebody realized, well, nope, it's not going to work. So they literally had to take the house apart piece by piece. And so if you were walking around the corner there, and you can see through the brick, you can see the foundation. I think they just gave up. The foundation for Monsanto's House of the Future still sits there. So we're going to head into Tomorrowland, and we're going to be ending our tour in Tomorrowland. But they are actually musicians. I have the greatest respect for them. Here in Tomorrowland, and this was the last land and Walt really wanted to have is Tomorrowland. So we had to fill it with all kinds of companies. As I said, the American Dairy Association, the Hall of Aluminum, the Hall of Chemistry. We had 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea a couple weeks after the park opened. We had Dutch Boy Paints. We had Crane's Bathrooms of the Future. You came off the farm in 1955, you want to be able to see what's coming down the road if you didn't have those facilities at home. So a lot of interesting attractions. Right here, standing behind me, is where I first got introduced to Disney in 1977 as I worked as a hostess for America the Beautiful, the 360 film. Rumors, maybe it could come back because everything is still functional there. The building down at the very end that it was GE Carousel Progress, which is in Florida. Did you close it yet? I'm sorry? GE Carousel Progress.
No,
It's still open. Okay.
Seasonal operation.
Seasonal. And then we went to America Sings. Those characters packed up their bags and they moved over to Splash Mountain. And now it's Innovations, which is a takeoff of some of the things over in Epcot. Back in the corner, we had Mission to the Mars or Mission to the Moon, whichever years you happen to be here. Such exciting technology in those days. This big cylinder that you went in, something like a silo, sat around this big dome, because we were going to watch us take off from Earth, and the seats actually kind of jiggled and wiggled, and you thought, my gosh, isn't this excitement? And look, you got Indiana Jones and all of these wonderful things that we have today. Space Mountain went in 1977, opened up with a theater underneath with the Kids of the Kingdom, and then we did 3D movies, Magic Journeys, Captain EO, and now we borrowed Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, which I think is great. This was Monsanto's Inner Space, where you were shrunken like a molecule. And I understand the molecules were actually Mickey's heads. The Lover's Lane of Disneyland, for any of you who may remember that. So many things. How about the People Mover? Yes. We used to run along here. Then we came up with this great new attraction called Rocket Rods. Anybody get to ride it? Once, maybe? Stood in line for 2 hours and rode it once. And it never lived up to Disney standards. They never asked me, but what I would think would be very inexpensive to put there would be Buzz Lightyear. Why not? We have the technology and everything. Like Buzz is a real cute attraction. Isn't that cute? Yeah. So things continue to evolve here. When they originally went to open, the Imagineers said, whoa, you know, it's actually there in there. This is well for opening, fill it with balloons and label all the weeds with Latin names because they'll think they're exotic plants. They label all the weeds. But now as you walk through, you're going to see peppers and anything that's seasonal. There should be cabbage and things growing. We call it agri-future. We do not eat it here like at the land in Florida. So a lot of things has changed. I'm going to take us up by this mural because I want to point out how they've done these attractions here. If you will look at this mural, you will see the House of the Future up there. You have the train coming around. There was our flying saucer. This man is sitting there. We used to be flying saucers here. You see the People Mover, the clock that told the time around the world, the monorail, and we have symbols for chemistry, the Hall of Aluminum, etc. But they're all focused up here, and 20,000 things. to end our tour. I thank you very much for wearing a sticker for sticking with me. And I do hope that you come back and visit us during our 50th year, or if not sooner, if you get a chance. We have the parks all over the world. Our newest one will open in a couple of years. We've added, of course, to Paris with MGM, Disney MGM, and Florida continues to add, and the Tokyo Seas just opened, and they've already had millions of people. They've already had millions of people visit. Really love Disney over in Tokyo. So I encourage you to come back, visit us again, and are there any questions that I can answer? It just went away. There's some seats if you would go to our casting office and would like a job. In case you don't want to stand in line, you can sit and maybe even move your car. And they have some in the cafeteria. What happened with those exhibits?
Oh, I like this thing. I want to hear this explanation.
Yeah, the exhibit, the only thing that was here was the exhibit for the movie. Our submarines, they were military-like submarines here, and they were just called the submarines. And they went away, for what reason, I don't know. The lines were always long. They ended up research their subs started out as military subs until somebody thought that we shouldn't be militaristic here, and you better change it. So, oh, we still have them. Those submarines cost $80,000 a piece. They were built at the Todd Shipyards, the same place the Nautilus was built by General Dynamics. So they have not gone far. They're still here. And maybe with this new treasure planet, we thought maybe Atlantis would be a big hit. Maybe we could do something there. Now we'll have to go for Treasure Planet and see what happens with that movie. So that's coming out very shortly. So many things, they go on the drawing board. Some things just never happen. You know, the submarines, it could have been a glass bottom boat ride. Walt wanted live animals in the Jungle Cruise. They wanted live birds in the Tiki Room, and that was going to be a restaurant. Pirates could have been a wax museum. They wanted to walk through for the Haunted Mansion. But as they grow and learn, some things go by the wayside. And we have warehouses where they do mock-ups. They were riding the Indiana Jones parts of that 2 years before it ever opened here. So we have a vast warehouse of things and knowledge. So very intelligent people doing everything. I appreciate you taking my tour today. I hope you have a great holiday coming up and the holiday of Veterans Weekends. If we have any veterans aboard, thank you very much for our country, the duty that you've done for your country, ladies and gentlemen. And come back and see us again. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so
I see it! See it coming? Yes! The other people have to get off! I see it!
Very high tech.
Fantastic. All the sails down, pans flying across the have
All hands on deck! Stand by to go ashore! Yard man aloft! Into the foot ropes! Furl the top gallants! Down with the flying jib! Make ready the bow anchor! Stand by all lines! Stand by the bow line, port side! Let go the bow anchor! Let go the cage! It's been a pleasure serving with you aboard the Sailing Ship Club. The first ship to carry the stars and stripes round the world. You've been a fine crew, and we hope you'll be sailing with us again soon. All hands, prepare to go ashore!
All right, now on ashore. On ashore now. All right, now watch your step as you make your way down the ground. Line out, crew. Yes, enjoy the rest of your day at this wonderful place. This magical place I like to call work. Bye now. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye. Bye now. Bye now. Bye now. Should have been off my boat by now. Sorry.